Greetings and salutations. And we are live! Greetings and salutations, guys. Thank you so very much for joining us. We are so excited about today to be part of Gen Con Live! Whoop, 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 whoop. So for those of you who don't know us and have dropped into our stream, I'm Janet. And this
I'm
is
Dimitris.
Dimitris, yes, well done. Sorry. And we are the founders of World Anvil, the ultimate world building platform. We are not going to be talking about World Anvil today. This is not a pitch. This is supposed to be a seminar in which we teach you what we reckon is the best way to build a world for a tabletop game. And in fact, as an author, I also use this method for creating worlds for my writing as well. But we're not talking about that today. We are talking, of course, specifically about how to use Agile world building to build a world that doesn't have loads of extra stuff in it that you don't need, to keep your world on course during your campaign. And we're going to be talking about how to get your players really hooked as well. This is something that's really important to both of us, having GM'd, is making sure that our players are as excited as we are whenever we come to the table, and that they are excited about our worlds. So these are all questions we're going to be addressing today. This seminar will run for 90 of your finest minutes, and we will be making sure that there's lots of time at the end to ask questions. If you do have a question during, then capital letters question and then your question, write that in chat and we'll be collecting those. But again, guys, as we say, we're going to have a special part for questions at the end. So if you have questions, you can sit on those and put them in at the end, or you can put them in at the moment that you have them, that they occur to you. Just a quick thank you for those of you who had to sit and wait for us to come back. Restream had a bit of a frag out and did not want to stream to YouTube. But hello to folks on YouTube, hello to folks on Twitch. I think we are everywhere we are supposed to be. Well, we have plenty to talk about, so I guess we better get on, haven't we?
Yep.
Let's do it.
1, 2, 3.
And we're tiny. All right, folks. I'm hoping that we're the right way around. Every now and then we get end up flipped. So yeah,
it looks fine.
If everything is mirrored, do let us know. So, brave new world building. What is Agile world building? So this is a method that Dimitris and I came up with. We talk about world building non-stop. Of course, we run a world building platform for almost 1,000,000 world builders. So world building is constantly on our mind and has been for a very long time.
Day and night.
We interview experts weekly about world building as well. So this is something that we are very well versed in, very well attuned to the problems of. And if there's an issue, we know about it. Not for nothing do we have articles called the 10 most common world building mistakes and some such things.
We've seen them all.
We've seen it all. So let's jump straight in and talk about, if you would. That's us. That's
Hi. Smile and wave, boys. Smile and wave.
Smile and wave. This is the site we should have been on. We have a community of almost 1,000,000 world builders. We talk about world building. We think about world building. We are all about world building.
We think by our birthday will be 1,000,000.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a race, people.
So essentially, we've seen every problem in the book. We've had people ask us questions, you know, I'm encountering this, that, or other, with every problem in the book.
Yeah.
And specifically for GMs, the standard model is not ideal. It doesn't work. So let's talk about what the standard model is, and then we can tell you why it doesn't work. Top to bottom world building. This is one side of the standard model. It's either top to bottom or bottom to top. In the top to bottom method, you are a god. You look down on your world and you start by creating the really big stuff, and then you go in and in and in.
And by very big stuff, we're talking about cosmology, like these are my gods, and this is how the world was created, and these are the continents, and these are the countries, and
this
these
is
are
what
the
you
cities.
see in the night sky.
Yeah.
And these are my peoples, my races, my species. This is how they came to be.
And 3
All
years
that
down
good
the line, you say, and this is the point that my campaign will begin.
And that is the problem with top to bottom. When you front load your world building like this, you end up in a situation where you never start your campaign. You get lost in the world building. And it's a real shame, because all of that wonderful work that you've done, it never gets used because you never make it to the table. And also, it's an important thing to know for GMs. we are always a bit more invested in our world than our players are.
At least in the beginning.
At least in the beginning, absolutely.
Also, I would like to say something important. Although top to bottom world building can be arduous and actually take a lot of time, that does not mean that this is not a way to do if you are a game master. It means that if you're a game master that has a specific amount of time that you can give because you have a day job or because you have a degree to finish or you are running a world anvil that takes about 14 hours of your day, it won't be possible for you to start a campaign in a week from the point that you're starting if you're going for top to bottom world building. The agile method we'll be talking about will tell you actually about how to do it in less than a week.
Yeah. The other thing that top to bottom is very bad for is that it can lead to railroading. Railroading is a term many of you will be familiar with. Essentially, we as GMs create a world, and there are two approaches. The one is more you funnel your players toward things, and the other is more you allow your players to explore and stumble upon the story. Both of these are fine, but both of those have an extreme that is not fine. If your players are wandering so much that they get lost in a sandbox space, that's bad because your players feel very aimless. They start to feel like their actions don't matter. If you are very, very funneling your players, you are railroading, you're pushing them in certain directions, you remove that feeling of free will.
Absolutely.
Now, the reason top to bottom leads to railroading is that once you've made something really cool, you really want to get your players there to show it to them. And that can really be a problem because your players might be resisting, they might not be interested in it, they don't want to go there yet. And again, it can really remove the feeling of free will that is so important to create that suspension of disbelief in the game. So let's go on to bottom to top. This is where you start in a tavern, in a village, for example, in a basement full of rats, for example, in a random dungeon in the middle of nowhere, for example, and you build out. So you start with a small scene, and as the campaign progresses, you start saying, oh yeah, by the way, there's a city over there. Oh, and by the way, there's another city where the king lives. Oh, and by the way, there's another country that you hadn't heard of until now, but that also exists. And that tends to be how bottom to top works.
And the problem with that, of course, is that you don't have any context.
Yeah.
Effectively, by building like that, you kind of spotlighting your world. You're spotlighting your work, which means that you know everything possibly about what is happening around the players in 5 miles radius, but the moment they go 10 miles away, you have nothing. And the problem with that is not actually about what you have, it's about what you know about the world. You cannot do any viable preemptive mentioning of things. You cannot really
foreshadow.
You cannot foreshadow. You cannot give them an element and the feeling that the world is big because there is no world to be talked of. You don't know about your gods. You don't know about effectively who are the big powers that struggle in this area, which are the important things that you have to write about.
So it's very hard to make an epic campaign when you don't know about the big moving parts of your world. The other problem, of course, is something I call mosaic world building. If you've ever played World of Warcraft or similar MMORPGs, you will know exactly what I am talking about. This is when you enter the fairy level, or realm, or whatever it is, and everything is fairies and glowing lights and beautiful shiny things, and they have no technology, but everything's done by magic, or it's very rudimentary. And then you go into another area, and it's high-tech, everything is like shiny chrome, it's steampunk, they've had the Industrial Revolution, things are going on. And then you go into another level, and it's hell. And nothing is connected, and nothing is working together. So there's no reason why the fairy people haven't set up trade with the steampunk people in order to start getting technologies into their world to improve life, which is realistic and probably what would happen, except that, oh, well, I built this bit like this and I built that bit like that and I forgot that they're supposed to meet up. So you end up with zones in a world, and that's why I call it mosaic world building. They're like tiles of mosaic.
And it might be okay if you're doing dimensional travel, but if you're doing about the same planet, we will not expand into that right now, but effectively cultures intermingle, trade with each other, exchange things, and of course technology and culture and traditions are flipping from one place to another.
Stephen Ryder says, and suddenly pandas. Yes, exactly.
I like that expansion by the way. It was really fun, just out of note.
The problem here is that it breaks suspension of disbelief again.
Absolutely.
It doesn't feel real, and what you want is for your players to feel invested in your world, and they can only do that if they feel like it's a real place that they are exploring. Yeah. Also, bottom up can lead to railroading as well, because you end up with that "you cannot go this way" barrier. You know, in Skyrim, when you run to the end of the mountain and it's like, you've reached the end of the world. They do it in Witcher as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when you get to the end and the little thing comes up and it's like, you've reached the end of the world. And then Geralt says to himself, "Huh, can't go this way." And then he turns around. It's very funny. Yeah, so it's another bad road to railroading is if you haven't built something there, you tend to end up shoving them in the other direction. So this is bottom up and top down. They are the two standard methods of world building, and that is why they don't work very well for game masters. They do work for lots of other media. It works in The Witcher. Like, I don't mind being told I can't go that way because the world is very rich in The Witcher, and also everything is pre-programmed. The Witcher can only make certain decisions and can only do certain things. His path is programmed. If you've ever played live with real players, you know they'll do all sorts of random things you didn't expect them to do. Exactly like this. So for those of you who can't read this, if the screen is too small, the two speech bubbles said, "I know, let's go south. No, let's head to that obscure place the DM once mentioned with the red dragon and skeletons," and the DM, of course, is sweating at this point because they haven't built that thing yet. And yeah, they're going to get there really soon. So we are going to introduce to you our own method, Agile Worldbuilding, which seeks to fix these problems. It seeks to help you manage the world building as your campaign grows, because of course you don't know where the story's going, because you don't know what your players are going to hook into, so you don't know what to build. So why not build as you go? And Agile Worldbuilding is going to help you do that in a way that will get your players invested and will also help you manage when they do take those moments where you don't know what they're going to do, or they do something surprising. So let's jump in. This is the Agile cycle. Would you like to talk about this?
Well, yeah. So first of all, I would like to say that this is Agile as a methodology is not something we have discovered. It's here for a very long time, and it's something that, especially in the development, web development and programming world, exists for a very, very long time. It is also has a lot of examples that is used in industry, and it is known to work very well in those structures. What we did is that we took the basic paradigms and principles of Agile methodology and brought them into world building, and that was the idea behind it. So in Agile, the most important thing is that everything that we do, it will be an iterative process. It means that essentially it's part of a cycle that you do something, then you do something else, and you eventually you come back to it and you continue doing the cycle again and again. Okay, in many ways you will see that, for example, as a GM, a known cycle you're going to have is probably your sessions. Like, you do a session, you do a wrap up, probably essentially you run your next session and you continue the next one and the next one and the next one until the end of the campaign. In Agile, we're talking about 4 basic structures, which is the dream and design cycle, step, the build and grow step, the play and test step, and the learn and think step.
Yeah.
Each of them will analyze more in detail for you, but what you need to know right now is that effectively what we expect you to do in every single location that we'll talk about so far is to think about what you want to do, go down, do it, try it out, see if it works, learn from your mistakes or your successes, and then do it once again.
Absolutely. So the play test phase, it might be a session 0, that might be an actual live session. There's lots of different forms that can take.
Yeah.
And the Agile world building process itself has a preparation stage. There is a session 0 stage where you get your players on board with your world, and then we'll tell you how to run your games, not how to run your games, but how to manage the world building in your games in order to complete the cycle and get you from concept all the way through to running your game.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're doing today.
One of the most important things that you should know about Agile World Building is this. In Agile World Building, you do not write prose. This is something that you don't do unless you have a lot of time to spend, no players to play with, or your session is planned for next year.
Prose is for authors.
Exactly. You always, for everything we're going to talk today, you write 3 to 5 sentences that in later in the next cycle might become a paragraph, or it becomes 2 paragraphs later down the line. And all will depend on what we're going to talk about in those sections.
Absolutely. So it's all about building up what you need as you need it to the level of detail that you need it. In the preparation stage, you remember I said there were 3 stages? This is the first, the preparation stage. This is you, the GM, acting as the god. It's always a fun time. So there are 3 stages that will take you through. The first is the foundation, which is the very, very first parts of your world, why you're building, what the big decisions, like what genre do you go for? Are you going for sci-fi or fantasy? This might be a moment where you pick your system as well. Then we'll take you to the scene, when you take the answers from the foundation and, again, as we said, develop them in more detail, start answering more questions about who lives in the space, and finally we'll take you through to plot, which is a great space to take a world that you've built and shove it into motion and make it feel real.
Shall we go foundation?
Let's do it. There's 4 parts of the foundation. Essentially, we're breaking everything down into steps. And for those of you who've said, gosh, I'd sure like a book about this, we will be releasing one. Don't you worry. But for now, we're doing talks. Motivation. What is your motivation is such an important question. It's not just important now, it's important 6 months down the line when you're stressed because your job has exploded, your players are doing something confusing, and you're trying to remember why you're excited about the project. That's when you need your motivation. You don't only need it now, you need it again in 6 months' time. Theme delves into what your world is going to feel like, the big concept of your world, where you want to go with it. Meta helps you define more information, and then drama is a conflict stage. What are the big things going on in your world? You want to go on?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So, motivation. These are the 3 big questions to answer. Why are you building this world? What are you hoping to get out of it? And what is unique or fascinating about this world? The why are you building, that's why you personally are building this. What is exciting? Maybe it's, I want to capture the excitement that I had when I saw the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. Or I've just seen 2001: Space Odyssey and I'm so inspired that I want to do my first sci-fi campaign. Or you want to kill all humans. Honestly, yeah, I'll join you. And that's a really important stage because you want to remember what the initial excitement, what that spark was for this campaign. And then what are you getting out of it? That might be, I want to run a 6 session adventure. I want to run a massive campaign. I want to eventually come up with a session I can publish, for example, like a setting book. What are some other examples of that?
Well, another good way to go around what you're getting out of it would be what you want your players to experience. It can be, for example, something along the lines of, I would like to make my players terrified, or I would like to make them have a lot of fun because they get through a stressful time, or I have a friend who has gone through a tough time and I want to make him smile. All of those are very important motivations because you can go back to them and refer to them and say, look, is my friend still having fun?
Yeah.
For example, or are my friends still terrified, and do I have given them nightmares yesterday, kind of thing. These are questions that are important. Like for me, it's very important as a DM to know if they are having nightmares or not based on my sessions. And of course, essentially, you can also be getting out of it in terms of physical, as you said as well. Times like, I would like to make sure that everything that I'm writing is recorded so I can write a book out of it. So based on your motivations, not only you will actually alter the way you think and you work during this process of actually writing your campaign, but also you can come back to them when you're feeling very bad, as you said, to make sure that you're still on track and you're still enjoying it and you're still going to do what you want to do. And if you do not feel that you're doing it, why you have started doing it in the first place.
Pangor Banner White says, I want to make my players feel like epic heroes. That
Me
is
too.
an incredibly important point at this moment, because that's going to help you make sure that every decision you make along the way is serving that purpose. And that is the key to motivation. You want to make sure that everything that comes after is doing exactly what you want it to do.
Absolutely.
And finally, what is unique or fascinating about this world? This is the thing you're going to tell your players. This is the thing where you're like, okay, it's like Lord of the Rings, but in space. Or it's like Game of Thrones, except everybody is playing slime oozes, for example, or something like that. Like, what is the hook? How do you excite them to play your campaign? How do you sum it up in one sentence, in a way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I completely agree. And many times, in fact, as you already showed as well, the unique selling point can be something, but with a twist. So, like, for example, let's say The Expanse, but with dragons. You see what I mean?
That's like Chris Fox books.
Well, yeah, for example. Or, for example, it is like Lord of the Rings, but cyberpunk. And you start thinking actually what this can be, how will I interpret that? And the thing is that depending on who you are actually addressing, there will be different things, right? And if you know your players, you will know what they want.
Absolutely. As Quasit says, this is the elevator pitch, but it is
Absolutely.
the one floor elevator pitch.
Yeah, it can be like 2
We are
sentences.
not, yeah, I mean, I was going to say one sentence, but yeah, very, very short. Like, it's the hook of the elevator pitch.
Once again, I will remind you, you should write 3 sentences to a paragraph about each of them. I mean, even less than that
Maximum,
in this case,
yeah.
maximum. So you have them. Myself, I write a sticky note, and I have it in front of my DM's book, for example, or my screen, for example, somewhere around, and I always refer to it visually, so I know why I'm doing what I'm doing. For example, I don't remember who was that said I want to have an epic adventure. If you have written down that, and the adventure starts to have, for example, a very dark note, or it becomes very gothic, or it becomes very about emotional troubles, then you know you are veering away from your original track kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So enough?
Let's do it. The theme is the next part of the foundation. This is your first setup document. What does it feel like to experience this world? You're going from the previous question of how do you want your players to feel, and you're digging into that a little bit more. Is it a dark and gritty and a world full of despair? Is it a world full of rainbows? Is it a world in which your heroes will feel epic, but coming up against great struggle? And then what is the genre of your world? This is a really important thing to decide at this point, but just let me note that genres do not necessarily fall neatly into the categories that the bookstore would like us to believe.
Absolutely.
You can have something that is a bit of category A and a bit of category B and a bit of category C. That's absolutely fine. But deciding which space you are telling stories in sets up certain expectations from your readers. If you are creating a Lord of the Rings style medieval fantasy space, you don't want to start introducing robots in session 4 because it will give them whiplash. That's really the space we're in. So deciding what your genre is now is really going to help you with the next steps. And again, you'll take that from your motivation, you'll take that from the decisions you've already made. And then it's time to talk about recurring themes. This is things that you will use as touch points for that genre, for that player experience. It might be music, you might use repeating music. It might be storytelling motifs, like the repeated appearance of crows cawing at sunset, for example. In a gothic campaign, that's exactly what I would use.
Exactly. Or even, for example, in an epic campaign, it can be the cheering of the people, or like grandstanding, or, like great feasts congratulating the heroes kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because, you know what, in an epic campaign, being congratulated, like in the end of the Star Wars movie that does not exist, is in fact, going through the crowd and being cheered and being hailed as heroes. Absolutely. Kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So picking those recurring themes and keying them into the genre and the player experience, that's already giving you a very good sort of overall impression of what you want that experience to be of your players playing this campaign. I need you to move to the next slide.
Of course. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Okay, so we have decided so much about our world with so few questions, which is fantastic. We're already getting a great picture of what it looks like. The next trick is one from our very own Trent Hergenrader, who is a professor of world building. But I think it's Brandon Sanderson who explains it best. Brandon Sanderson, of course, big, fancy, epic, super best-selling uber fantasy writer of epic fantasy, and absolutely seen as a world-building authority. One of the things he says is if you drill down in a few areas, and I paraphrase, you will make your whole world feel very, very, very rich and give it a lot of depth and a lot of sort of detail. But you'll only be doing that in certain areas, so you won't end up having world builder's disease, trying to front load all the world building and end up never playing your campaign. It's that top-down thing.
Absolutely.
So to prevent top-down, to prevent that sort of block that you get from trying to create everything, pick about 3 to 5 areas, and I would say more 3 than 5, that you want to expand your world in.
I would say honestly a hard 3, but yes, fair enough, yeah.
This is such an important step, because if you try to expand everything, you will never get to the table, or your world will feel like a very thin veneer that has no detail. And the devil is in the detail.
And because there are people who indeed love to write for all of them, and we've seen in previous workshops we've done as well that people say, okay, I will focus on those, but I will write all of 3 of them. There is a very neat trick you can do in order to make them real. Don't try to expand in all of them, but ascribe to each of them if it goes up as a trend or down as a trend. Which effectively means that the more dynamic, let's say that you talk about economic strength and wealth distribution and race relationships, okay? And effectively, of course, race relationships, for example, might be having an upward trend because it becomes more important, because there is currently struggle, because the dwarfs just came from a different dimension. Suddenly, it's all about essentially the dwarf and human dynamic kind of thing and how that's going to go. But you can have essentially technological influence as a secondary information that you don't write so much about, but you also know that this is also in the growth. It's ascending slowly kind of thing, and it might in fact sprout some more prompts and information about that.
Absolutely. So yeah, essentially this is a stage to stop you trying to do everything. You pick your areas. That doesn't mean you can't do more later. That means as you start your project, you limit the amount of stuff you allow yourself to do so that you don't get overwhelmed. And this is all about just building what you need as you need it. So for example, you can take from your genre, and you can take from your player experience, and you can take from your motivations. If your motivation is, I'm so excited about Pirates of the Caribbean, and the thing that excited me was the idea of having these like free democracies of pirates in this very regimented world of empires, then maybe you want to talk about rule of law or government presence.
Or wealth distribution, for that
or
fact.
wealth distribution. If you are writing about the Industrial Revolution because you've just seen something, like a movie or something that's really got you excited, you might be writing about technology influence.
I was about to say wealth redistribution when it comes to
Absolutely. So look at the answers that you've already had. This is going to be a theme throughout the whole talk. Look at the answers you've already given and make sure that you're choosing the best things to go with what you've already done.
Exactly.
Help yourself.
And that's why we said write 3 sentences to a paragraph, because if you have only a sentence or 3 sentences or a paragraph for each of them, you can easily find them, and it will not take you 1,000 years to go through. Like writing a whole article about the technological influence of your world will mean that if you want to go and remind yourself what's happening there, you have to read the whole article, and that's not conducive to what you're trying to do.
So lean prose, clear sentences, always easier to reference.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
where we're at. Let's go on to drama. Everybody loves drama. Okay, so when we say drama, we are talking essentially current affairs. What's moving in your world? What's shaking? What's on the headlines? What are people talking about? What are people concerned about? So the 3 big questions we have here. What are the major current affairs of your world? Remember, current affairs are not only bad, they are also good. In our own headlines, we find a plague, worldwide pandemic. We find technological advancements.
Yeah, but we also find, for example, the beginning of the Mars era, because everybody's trying to go to Mars lately.
Yeah, there's a new space race going on. There are heating tensions between certain nations and other nations. There is political unrest in certain countries. Again, I'm not naming any names because I love everybody and I just want you all to be happy. But that's the current affairs in our world. And cracking open the Guardian website or a newspaper or something is a great way to get inspired for these current affairs and think about what are the big things happening in your world right now.
And the beauty about it, and I think we'll discuss a little bit about it later on, is that by writing, as we said, 3 sentences for each of them, or essentially a sentence for 3 current affairs and sentence for each of the 3 threads and 3 struggles, you automatically have a world that a lot of things are happening, because the moment, psychologically speaking, that you start talking to your players about more than 5 things, they lose track of them, which is beautiful, because
it feels
the
like
moment
many.
Exactly, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, many, and the moment it goes into many, the world is alive. The world is much bigger than they can imagine, and that's what you want, because you won't write all of them, but they will know about them in the sphere of influence that you have.
And they'll see touches of them in everything. And again, as we said, all of these things have trickled down to the next. So those current affairs are going to be played out, little bits of them, on the streets.
Yeah,
in
you can
the dialogue
see them
that
essentially
you choose.
happening.
Exactly. Let's talk about threats. The threats the inhabitants of your world face. Again, right now we're in a global pandemic. That's a great example. But there may also be geographical instability. There may be earthquakes, natural disasters. There may be magical instability, invading forces, war. These are all threats that your inhabitants will face.
Indeed.
And finally, what are the everyday struggles? Do people have enough to eat? Do people have what we consider basic human rights? Or are people struggling for them? Is there racial inequality? Is there gender inequality? Again, in the previous slide, you saw all of the meta information. What of that is played out every day?
How
in
do
the
you
struggles
hook
of
them
your
as
people?
well? Because, for example, if you are doing a military campaign, the struggle there might be that the army that of your country, whatever that may be the invading army, and they're now struggling because they're away from their resupply lines. So the struggle there is actually that you have hundreds of thousands of soldiers deep into enemy territory, and they're dying.
Yeah.
That is a struggle that effectively people in your world, like in your city, maybe they feel because there are kids and women and children kind of thing, that they have their parents and sons and everybody actually lost in like hundreds of thousands of miles away from them.
Absolutely. And again, you don't need to be too specific at this stage.
Yes.
Somebody mentioned, I think it was, no, I can't find it. Zifi Hawk mentioned that they always write 5 or so news headlines for the city or nation.
Beautiful
This
idea.
is exactly that kind of thing for your world in general.
Yeah.
Or at least the space of the campaign. And we'll get into that in a minute.
Just a clarification here, since we touched on it. By world, we don't mean a planet, we don't mean a universe, we don't mean the galaxy, whatever you want to be. Your world is the location that you have decided that you will be playing with your campaign.
Yeah.
And we'll go in detail later on that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think we've covered drama.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that is the first big document, the foundation document. And essentially what we've covered is your motivation, a little bit about the feel of the campaign, and a little bit about some of the stuff that is going on.
And if you
Very
consider there were
general.
about 12 questions there, if each paragraph is about 3 sentences, you're talking about an A4 page, maybe 1.5, and that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is not a long document. We are unpacking a lot to help you understand the use and the context, but this is not a long document. I think an A4 page is plenty for each of these.
Yeah.
So we've done the foundation. It's time for the scene. This is where we take the information that we've set down and we extrapolate it. So we start thinking about, okay, well, if this is my genre and this is my motivation and this is where I want to go and this is some of the conflict that's going on, what does that look like in real terms? We're going to talk about the rules of your world. That's natural laws, cosmology, all of that good stuff. A little bit about geography, a little bit about the sapient species, races, peoples, whatever you want to call them, and then a little bit about the history of the space as well. Which are the unique forces or natural rules governing your world? Do you have magic? Do you have psionics? This is a really important moment to start establishing those things, because if they come as an ass pull in session 4, your players are going to be very upset, because suddenly they're not playing the campaign they thought they were playing, and you will get mixed reactions from them.
Absolutely. And also, it's not just about saying, yes, there is magic into my world. You can say, for example, yes, it's magic in my world, but it's a magic that is ruled by mana, and mana is generated every day, for example, and lost by the end of the day. Yeah. That is a rule of physics. This is the very initial thoughts of how your magic will work.
A great example of this is the rule of equivalent exchange in Full Metal Alchemist.
Absolutely.
So neat and beautiful. It's a beautiful piece of world building. Nothing is for free. Everything is created through equivalent exchange. That's the rule of magic in that universe, and that would be an example of one of the unique forces or natural rules.
Or the laws that govern the magic of Avatar the Last Airbender, essentially. Also very specific elemental magic with some kind of mutations of magic, but all comes from the same source. It's specific essentially in the lineage that you are born. So these are rules that define how magic works and give the person who's going to play in your world the basics understanding of how that very important thing works in your world.
Now, for a lot of you, the answer to this question might be, there is magic, it's D&D style. That's fine, that's okay. You need to establish that now so that you know how to continue.
Yeah.
If you want to do something different, there are some spaces that only have arcane magic and don't have divine, or vice versa. That's something you should establish now. Again, this is just about making sure you know where you're going and you know what you want. And of course, how did your world come to be? Please do not write the Silmarillion. 3 to 5 sentences is plenty. This may be, if you don't want to pin yourself down, this may be the general impression of how the world came to be. It may be one myth or two myths, each told in one sentence. For example, the world was laid by a giant world snake and came from an egg, or the world popped into existence from nowhere.
The difference here is these are not the myths. These are the reality of how your world came to be. And I'm saying that, and it might not make much sense to you now, but your truth is not the truth that your players and the living of your world will know. So for example, in one of my worlds, the truth of how the world came to be was that there actually was a virtual reality game that 12 kids were playing, and everybody is in fact a figment of their imagination. What the players would know is that simply enough, there are 12 gods that rule the earth and they made the world.
Yeah.
That's quite a different thing.
Absolutely. As Scotty Mike says, we're back to Brandon Sanderson and his laws of magic. The ability to solve problems or create plot points with magic is directly proportional to how well readers or players understand how magic works. Yes, but remember that in an RPG game, it goes a step further, because if you have magic users, they have to know how the magic is working. So,
because they're going to be playing these players.
Absolutely. So it's not just that they need to know kind of how it works, they need to have mechanics for it. So if you are creating your own mechanics, this is the space to start thinking about those and how those will work. You don't need its final form, but you do need an impression of how it's going to work so that you can build. We're going to talk about geography now, but this is not name that mountain, draw that lake. This is, what is the general geography? Is your world like Hoth? Is it an ice planet? Is your world a primordial world where it's very young? You've got dinosaurs and a lot of geological instability and volcanoes every 2.5 minutes. What is the general impression of your world?
Yeah, is it flying islands, for example?
Exactly. Is the surface uninhabitable and everything has to go underground, for example? And are there any special properties or features? A great example of this is the seasons in Game of Thrones. They don't last regular, predictable amounts of time. You get some seasons that last years and winters that last generations. I think that is the quote.
Yeah.
And they're never quite the same length, and they're unpredictable, and it's all terribly unbalanced. And that is very, very important. That is a key part of the world. This is something that you need to be thinking about now.
While, for example, in Pern,
and McCaffrey's world.
And McCaffrey's world, you'll have essentially a moon that throws spores at the world, and these spores essentially do things that I don't want to break it for you. You don't read the books.
I think we're past the international spoilers.
You think so?
Dateline. Yeah, absolutely. Dragon Riders of Pern, I think, came out in the 80s. So we've had some time. We've had 40 years.
Okay,
so essentially, there's a moon. The moon throws spores on the Earth. When it lands on the Earth, it's this fungus that destroys everything. So that is a key part of the geography, although it is
a special property and feature as well of the world, though.
Exactly. If your world orbits a binary star, that's going to have influence.
Exactly. How is the days run and
exactly. If your world orbits another planet for some freaking reason, that's going to have a big impact. For example, if your world is a moon of a planet, that's going to have a big impact. So thinking about these things now is really going to help you imagine the space much more clearly. Again, we are not playing Name That Mountain, we are playing general geography. Who are the living of your world? If you are playing a Pathfinder-like world with a quadra-gazillion races, you do not have to name them all. Just choose the important ones.
We like them, by the way, just to be clear.
They're awesome. I love Pathfinder. But if you are playing a world with that many sapient species, do not feel like you have to catalogue them all. It's one of those some many lots situations.
Yeah, exactly. You can say like mostly humans, and then we have another 5 species that are these, and then there are a lot of other species, and that is a very nice way to start. Because honestly, people in your core probably they haven't seen all the species, right?
Exactly. And so just establishing that there are many species, here are some of the main ones. That is enough for here. Again, we're dealing with 3 to 5 sentences. We are not dealing with pages and pages of prose.
Or a list, like a small list, not like
a brief list will be absolutely fine. Yeah. And then with a brief attribute, like these guys are scaly, these guys are cold-blooded, these guys live in
CSRD.
CSRD also works. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how are they united or divided? Again, one sentence. These guys are are completely intermingled with these guys hate those guys, these guys had a war with these guys that they've never forgiven, and these guys are actually symbiotic.
And also, for example, these guys created this country, and these guys created that empire, and these guys are effectively, for example, raiders or living into the desert kind of thing.
So, for example, in Skyrim, I would list the main races, the main playable races, and then I'd say, well, these guys enslaved these guys, and these guys are fighting an empire which is trying to keep them in it, and these guys have this special religion, and everybody else hates it, so that's going on, and then these guys come from a faraway land that is elsewhere.
And Skyrim, in generally speaking, this world is very interesting because they have the world separated in different, let's say, countries or counties, but the countries and counties are not race specific, which is a very big mistake people do, like, you know, the kingdoms of dwarves or the elven worlds kind of thing. It's not supposed to be like that. We're not going into this detail because we can talk about this for hundreds of hours, trust me. But consider this, the living people of your world are not just your races, but also are the people, like the countries and organizations they build.
Absolutely, absolutely. So just a little bit about the living. Again, if you only have humans, which is very common, just a little bit about the different ethnicities or the different nationalities or however they divide themselves, however they understand their divisions. And then a little bit about their politics, essentially. And finally, what are their living conditions? This can be both they need X or Y to survive, or it may be they live in squalor with a wealthy, greedy despot.
Yeah, you can say, for example, that the empire, see Roman Empire or whatever, is full of wealthy people in general, that they essentially prey on each other, on the others, and they have enslaved nations, so they live in general like wealth, or while the North people, in fact, are striving and having big trouble surviving the winter kind of thing most of the time.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's the space we're talking about here. 3 to 5 sentences, not the Silmarillion. And their history. Again, this is a place, it's very tempting to start writing a massive timeline. If you're a World Anvil user, it's very tempting to write massive historical entries. We're not there yet. When your players are asking questions, that's when you're there. But for now, we are just writing about the big stuff. In our own world, there were 2 massive world wars in the 20th century that shaped the political landscape even today. That would be one of the events that shaped the lands.
Yes, absolutely.
What are the stories and histories they carved upon your world? So, essentially, what happened and what was its impact? And you might have maybe 5 to 10 points maximum of historical things that were impactful.
A very good point here to be made is that if you're writing high fantasy or any kind of fantasy that has ancient dead races and that the left ruins, this is exactly the point to write it down, saying there were essentially, in fact, 3 major civilizations that used to thrive in this world. They're all destroyed because of XYZ reason, and they have left the ruins that are, ready to be explored by mighty adventurers and get all the loot. Get all the loot!
All the loot! Absolutely. So, essentially, I think that is the scene. Can you flip on? Yeah. So you've done part 2 of your setup. You have created your first A4 page, which is the foundation. That's the basic questions. You've created your second A4 page. That's setting the scene. And again, you're going to be drawing those questions through. If your motivation and your genre is noted in the first one, you're going to use those to answer the questions in number 2.
Absolutely.
And similarly, as we jump into the plot, you're going to be using the answers that you already have to create your plots. And there are 4 kinds of plots. And again, what we're going to be doing is we're talking in single sentences right now. We are not unpacking the entire life history of the great devil Asmodeus. We are talking single sentences that you can then use. So the Eternal Play is the super big ones. The long games are the smaller ones. The big story might be your campaign level. That might be it. And then the small fry are the smaller quests. At the moment, we are still talking as gods, good game masters. So we are thinking from the omniscient perspective. We are thinking, what do we know about this? So here we have 4 sentences. The 4 sentences are, Asmodeus orchestrates his ascent from hell at the top. That's a big old plot. That's centuries worth of work. That needs a project manager if I ever saw one. So then we get to the Archmage, project manager of Asmodeus, and his thrall, tasked to collect one of the 5 required artifacts to open a gate to hell. Good, that's one of the things that Asmodeus has on his checklist. That's a long game plot. It's going to take a while to do that thing. But that spawns another quest. The Archmage's apprentice summons demons in an attempt to revitalize the ancient site. Because they can't open the gate to hell unless the ancient site is revitalized. Cool. This all makes a lot of sense. We've got a dribble down here. And then finally, apprentices' mercenaries terrorize local villages and steal young children for sacrifices. Because how are you going to revitalize that site? Blood. So what we have here is a massive plot that's got some trickle down to other plots. Now that's really, really cool because what you have is a big thing going on and something your players can tackle. You don't want to give your players Asmodeus. They're going to be splat. They're going to regret the time they spent making characters. Do not
Pretty
want that. You need to make sure that you are giving them something that they can deal with right at the beginning. So from your player's perspective, of course, all they know is that young children are being stolen. If they follow that plot up the line and they try and learn more, they will become more knowledgeable about what is going on. But you, as the game master, knows that this Asmodeus thing is unfolding and you can pull that out at any point. At any point that you need it, you can be like, oh, this quest leads back to Asmodeus somehow. That's fine. You can do that. And that's a really useful thing to have. So let's go on.
Again, before we continue, a good reminder here is this is what you know, not what your players know. Everything we discussed here, even down to the apprentice, might not be in fact what the players know. I mean, you don't have to introduce them to your players. Oh yeah, this is the apprentice of the Archmage X. It can be just George.
As I say,
mage.
It's only if they're curious and follow and investigate that they will discover this.
Yeah.
And of course, because it's only a single sentence, you can add a few more. So what we've done here is we've added a second eternal game. There's an ancient blue dragon plotting his world domination. What else would you do to while away the time? And we've introduced a second long game. There's a big war that's brewing between 2 strong kingdoms. Each of those can also start spawning little quests, medium quests, larger quests. You can bring things in and bring things back. And again, what I didn't mention from the previous slide, and that was my fault, is again, the rumours about it in the last year on the big story here. So this is something that your players might have heard something about, maybe, if they question the right people. It's a great way to foreshadow what's going on.
Absolutely.
And that's something you can always pull out when you need it. You are prepared because you know what's happening. And that is super, super useful as a game master because it means you can always link something back to something else and make sure that it feels, to your players, like you know what's going on. Even though you only have 6 sentences.
Exactly. And as Janet just said, you can always give them little hints of what's happening. A good example for the example we're showing here is that they might, even from the very beginning, when they are doing nothing to do with the blue quest, as we show it here, talk about the fact that there are posters, for example, for recruitment. The war hasn't even started just yet, but you know, there is recruitment happening. Or, for example, there might be people drafting people, or effectively
commandeering supplies,
whatever this might be. Again, nothing to do with the original thing, and if they've never asked, they will never learn, but you still gave them the point. To answer the people in the chat, yes, I will be giving you a link for this PDF, so you can actually have it as notes. You don't need to actually write notes, just listen here and learn the details.
Yup. So essentially, as we said, the bottom-up world building method doesn't allow you to give that kind of foreshadowing. It's a real problem. You have a world where it just feels like there's lots of bits. This is the kind of thing that allows you, with 6 sentences, to start pulling in threads that you want to as a game master. You can even suggest links to one thing, but aha, it's actually linked to the other thing, right? You can start being very clever with this, teasing your players if you want to. And really all you need to do is just look at your 6 sentences.
And once again, the trick is here that you will make your world feel so much better than ever was, and you ever think, they will think that you have done much more work than you think, and that will excite them to trying to find things about
Exactly, and it's not about writing huge swathes of text, it's just about giving yourself the information that you need and the tools that you need.
And the breathing space, because when you do it in game, you're probably going to throw out a fart out of your mouth, but if you have prepared for it, you will be ready, you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And with all of that, your world is pretty much made. You don't need huge swathes of detail. you have the answers to your questions.
Yeah, you should have about 2 to 3 A4 pages of written text right now. That's not more than that.
Absolutely. And that is plenty to get started with. And you've got some ideas of the plots. And so you're ready to start playing with those players.
Yes.
Oh yeah, it's the fun bits. Once you have this information, which you have, I remind you, from a god perspective, from an omniscient perspective, from your perspective, in fact, you need to start thinking about the world, what the world looks like from your player's perspective. We have here an example of a primer. This is just a little bit of information.
It's an introduction to the world.
Oh, this is just an introduction. Sorry.
So this is actually the interpretation of your from your pitch
Yeah.
into a way that you can show them to your players. Like
Yeah.
let's say the expanded pitch in a way.
Yeah. So that little elevator pitch that you wrote, you're going to expand that with a few details from setting the scene, a little tempting morsel from the conflict section, and you're going to turn that into essentially the blurb of the book of your campaign. What would you write on the back if it were published?
Yeah.
How would you get them in?
In a specific example here, we start by saying high medieval, age of exploration meets hard science fiction in an unholy marriage, flying pirate ships, aliens and wondrous relics of unimaginable beauty and technology. You already kind of know where we're going with that?
There's a lot of buzzwords, there's a lot of hooks to get you in, and you have an impression of what you're going to be playing. A little
Exactly.
bit.
And then you give a little bit more to give them a bit more focus and give them some names and some essentially like flavor, in fact, to everything you said.
Absolutely. So a small elevator pitch, an expanded blurb, really, really useful tools, and then a primer. Now, this is two examples of different primers. These are both from World Anvil, and you can see the kind of information that you're giving to your players is general information that people know. You are giving some. You can see here. There's some information that this is low fantasy, character driven, a bit about tone, a bit about the rule of cool. So this is more meta information that you're giving your players. You don't have to do that, but it can be a good idea if you have not had a chance to have a good conversation with your players. And then a little bit about how the world basically functions. You can see there's a diagram here of the world's orbit, because they have an important thing in their geography that needs to be shared.
Yeah. And once again, it's about things that everybody will know. Like, for example, I ask you right now, you will know that we live in Earth, that there are another 3 or 4 or 5 planets around us, and we are in the sun, and humans are the only sentient species that can speak right now in the world, and that we, the basic things that we know about the world.
Basically where it's cold and hot, you know the basic technology levels,
Exactly.
you know basically where things are in the world. This is the kind of stuff that you'll be adding. And that's what the primer is for, essentially. It's the one page that you give to your players to say, this is my world.
Yes.
But you're not going to give it to them yet, because you're going to spend some time briefing them first. This is another nice thing to give. It's a basic known history. It might be five or so historical entries. Like, there was a war 80 years ago, this happened, recently this has happened, and also that happened.
And far, far away in the past, there was an ancient empire that now only the relics of it exist.
Exactly.
Kind of thing.
Relics are turning up from this thing called the Romans, and scientists are still trying to find out who they are.
But always remember that is very important. It's a very common mistake that many people do. Think what they will know, not what you know. And it's a very important distinction there. Ask yourself, how would my players understand that? Okay, you know it's an ancient relic. They might know just essentially that there are relics made of marble in the edge of the city, because that's pretty much as far away as they ever went in their lives, right?
Absolutely. So it may just be the barest of information, but giving them the information that their characters will know at the beginning of the campaign is really useful, so they don't feel like, oh, do I know about this? Do I know about that? No, they know what they know. You've given them the prime. There was a question here, is this what World Anvil looks like? Yes, this is a timeline from World Anvil, pretty much.
Pretty much.
Let's hop forwards. And a little bit of information about the current location, where you're going to be starting your campaign. That is always nice to give them, again, so that they have a basic understanding of the local knowledge.
Yeah, that can be effectively just talking about who they know, what kind of if that was a village, it might be which are the major characters, what kind of locations you might see, what is around in the area. Like, for example, if they are village peoples, they might know that there are effectively grain fields all over the place, and far away there is a mountain, and far away on the other side there is a river, and that hello cat, helpful cat indeed, and that in fact when you cross the ocean there is another city, a land called that as far as that you should go with that kind of
exactly thing. Like stuff that they would know from the area and stuff that they can see around them, essentially. You flip us forward, and again, if there are any hooks you want to give them from the player's perspective. Don't tell them that Asmodeus is rising from the depths. Tell them children have been going missing from the local village. That is what they will know. That somebody might have told them that. Nobody will tell them about Asmodeus. They're level 1.
Yeah.
Nobody cares about them yet.
But also, for example, you might be giving them a glimpse of a bigger line. Like, for example, that, as we said, soldiers are drafting people because there is a threat arising.
Yeah, something's happening. You've
Yes.
heard rumours that people's goods are being seized by soldiers.
Exactly.
Or whatever.
Next.
And now it's time to play with your players. So you have created this beautiful world. It's your original world. Very excited about it. It's time to get your players as excited as you are. There are some players who will come to you and say, right, I am playing a level 1 Forge Cleric and I have these specialties and I have min-maxed my character and here is my character art and here is my sheet and I'm done. Are you happy with this? That's fine. There are also players who rock up and they're like, yeah, well, I didn't know what we were doing, so like I didn't make anything. That's also fine. This is the moment where you bring your players into your world, whichever kind of player they are. So if they have made a noble background Forge Cleric, you start figuring out who their noble family are. What is their deity? How are they folded into this world?
What is the emblem of the family?
Where did
How
they
do
study?
they make their money?
Where is the noble house? Exactly. And a great way to do this is building them into the cultures and into the places in your world. This is really important. Now, Dimitris and I experienced this firsthand. We did a campaign recently. It was an all-bard campaign. It was hilarious.
Oh my god.
And one of the players, in session 1, we'd all done session 0 separately, and in session 1, he pulled up the map, and she went, oh my god, that's my hometown. Not my character's hometown, my hometown. Because she felt really connected to it.
Yeah, because I spent essentially an hour and a half talking with her, talking about effectively what has happened, what was the repercussions of her life in there. She knew that place, she knew the people there, she knew some of the secrets that no other player knew about this place. Yeah. So when she saw it on the map, she's like, I know this place, we might not be there, it's like miles away, but she knows it.
Yeah. And that is a perfect example of a player who is so invested in your world already because they feel like they are part of it. They feel like their character is built into it. And that's why this stage is so valuable. And again, weaving their backgrounds in. If you want them to be engaged, give them secrets that none of the other players know.
Yeah, I mean, something that is very common in D&D is that because of the way that rules work, for example, is that you choose a background. Make that background relevant. Don't say you are essentially a beggar or whatever. Say that you're a beggar in this city and that you have gone into begging because you lost all your money, or the noble of the land hates the guts out of you, so actually he continuously managed to destroy your life, kind of thing. So you gave them context. They're not just a beggar, they're a beggar with a reason without them being a beggar.
Absolutely. And they might be avoiding this mafia organization, or they might be part of that mafia organization, or there might be a thieves guild that they are in bad standing with, for example. There's so many places that you can go to build them in, and again, with the consent of your player, have a conversation and figure out how they're going to fit into this world, weave them into this world.
And they might never come into play, but they might. And you might find opportunities to make the world feel so of their own. You know when they say this was essentially an ex-player episode? Yeah. That's how this can become beautiful, because they will know so much more things that nobody else knows, and suddenly it will be their own kingdom.
And it makes them feel special, which is what you want at the end of the day. Each one of those players is supposed to feel special and important.
Or destroyed, depending on who you are.
And now you've done a play. Congratulations, you've done your first play on the Agile cycle.
In fact, you made 5 of them if you have 5 players.
Exactly. Your session 0 is a perfect example of play. From that session 0, you can learn. You can learn what your player expects this campaign to be. You can read between the lines of their questions. And as you have explained your world to them, they will have questions. That is so valuable. Write those questions down, because you know what they're interested in, you know what they might be unclear on, and you know where they might want their character to be going as well.
Yeah, and especially, for example, if your player is from the place where you're starting, now that you know a little bit more about them, and you said, oh, there is a general store, now you might know the name of the general store. You might know the name of the guy who has a general store, and the fact that your player actually stole from them some years ago, and suddenly you've written another paragraph in this location. It became much more alive. It became more part of your story and the story of your players.
So from each of these session zeros that you've played, you can learn from your players. You can learn what they want, both from what they've said and for how they've reacted to stuff. Dream about that information, digest that information, and then build it into your world and build it into your primer. Now is the time to give them the primer. Now is the time for them to finally read about your world from their perspective with those details in. Might not be all of them, but for example, make sure you mention the cities that each of the people come from, because they will go, oh my god, that's my hometown. And that's exactly what you want at this stage.
Exactly.
Now it's time for your adventure. We're not going to tell you how to do that.
Not today, at least.
Not today. This talk is already very long. So we're not going to tell you how to play your adventure.
Or how to write it, in fact.
Or how to write it. There are plotting, planning, scheming GMs. There are impro GMs who like to sandbox. It is entirely up to you which space you're in. There are lots of pros who can tell you how to write the adventure. We simply don't have time to do that in this talk. But this is the point to arrange the things for your first adventure.
Exactly, you're definitely ready to write it. You know your world, you know your players, and you know what it will make an exciting adventure for them and how you can fit it into their worlds and your world.
Absolutely. So again, use that cycle. Once you've played your session zeros, learn what your characters want, dream about how you can turn that into adventure that will give them what they want, what you want to give them, whether that's to feel like epic heroes, to be scared, to be enthralled, to be on a murder mystery investigation, whatever it is you want to give them. This is the time to answer those questions and make sure that you're delivering what you want to deliver.
Absolutely.
And of course, if you want to, you can do a party session zero. This is something that we love. We really recommend it. I know a lot of people like to jump straight into session one, but the truth is that a lot of players, they're trying on the costume of the character for the first time. There's a lot of things that are new. They're still learning their spells. They're working out their powers. This goes doubly if they are new to the system.
Absolutely.
Giving them a little bit of like dress rehearsal that doesn't count can be very kind to help them get into the character.
The easiest way to describe that is a warm-up session that you get the time to be a little bit, allow them a little bit to explore how their characters talk, walk, react, what do they know, what they don't know about the characters around them, and also has a more light adventure tone that will still allow them to try the session or try the, I mean, depending, if it's a new system, for example, you might want to have them go down the basement and kill some rats because the stakes are very low. They will not die from rats, but they will allow them to roll some dice, get to know a little bit the players,
have a little bit of interaction.
Yeah, exactly.
If you know that you have characters who are mainly social characters, give them some social stuff. If you know that you have characters that are mainly combat, give them some combat stuff. Let them flex their character muscles, give them some interaction scenes, and again, weave their individual backgrounds and help them meet each other. Yeah,
in many ways, for example, this doesn't even have to be another session or another day. You can say, let's play that for an hour and a half. Then let's just grab some pizza and you go into session one.
Absolutely. It may just be like the pizza and bio break, and then you jump in. Hopefully not at the same time.
Damn! If you have time between session 0 and session 1, you do exactly the same thing we talked before. You take the learnings that you got from this session, you think about it, you expand a little bit to it, and then you continue with session 1.
Absolutely. And again, you've played, you've learned from how your characters have reacted to each other, and to you, and to the things that you've presented. You dream about how you can use all of that information to create the next step of exactly what you want to deliver, and then you play session 1. Oh yeah! But of course, you have your pages of information. Maybe you've started to write a little bit more at this point. You've expanded where your characters come from. You've expanded a little bit about who they are, the families that they're from maybe, and you may even, again, we are from World Anvil, so we're going to say this, you may even have cracked open World Anvil and written some articles. It's a great way to keep track of your shit. That's why we made it. But in any rate, you are ready. You've run session 1, it was awesome. You've run session 2, it was awesome. At one point or another, you're going to have the thing that we showed you at the beginning, where the GM's like, yes, there's a boat going south. And your players go, we want to go north. You said there was a dragon up there. And you go, oh my God, you're going to die. Oh God, you're going to die so bad. This is how we handle that. This is the trick. So, because you have not built everything, you have not done top down, and because you want to make sure that everything is working together, you have not done bottom up. You've chosen the Agile method. Congratulations. This is how to keep it tenable. Create yourself this list. Have it in front of you, and it will save your butt. You're going to be very happy.
It's specific, specialized butt saving techniques there.
Yes, it is the Butt Saver 2020. So, first of all, we have names. Now, players are always going to ask you, oh my God, what's the name of that barmaid? And you're going to go, oh, she's called Doris. And soon everyone in your town is called Doris, because that was the go-to name.
Or even worse, next session she's called Beth.
Yeah, exactly. So then you have, like, the matrix is broken, and you start having people changing names and professions and all of that stuff. So have a list of character-specific names. You can use a generator to create those. I've got nothing against generators, but don't try to use a generator during your session, because you'll open it, and then you'll have to look something up, and then you won't find the right name, and then all of a sudden 5 minutes have gone by, and your players have their phones out. Like, that's what you want to avoid. Having the list there will super help you. Again, character names, 10 of them.
And once you use
locale
it,
names, 10 of them.
And once you use it, just on the right side of the list, you say Doris, Barmaiden of the X, whatever the X name is.
Rusty Tavern. That's it. You're done.
And then at the end of the session, you just fill up the next, so you have another 10 essentially at the end of the session for sure.
Yeah, and then in your learn phase, you can go ahead and transcribe that into your World Anvil or wherever you're keeping your notes.
Yes.
And you just have it. Like, she's just there. She's just an NPC. You're not going to lose her again. 3 fully fledged, not so random encounters. Why do we say this? Because you already have so much information about your world. You already have dramas and conflicts. You already have big and small plots. So,
to go back to what we were discussing before, for example, about the war, it's very common for you to roll 1d6 and you say, oh, there is 1d3 wolves out there. And that is quite lame because there is nothing to be said about that. But
it's not a memorable campaign.
But what if that encounter was actually 1d6 bandits, which are themed as soldiers who left the war, and now they are raiding the countryside, so they are wearing still the clothes of the regiment,
but they're deserters.
But they're deserters. And also, for example, they might be holding the papers that say wanted dead or alive for themselves, and because they are soldiers, they know tactics, and they know military tactics that were used on the war, and they're not just people who are just on their own saying, hey, give us your money kind of thing, but in fact they are smart. Two of them are up in the
story.
Two of them are up on the street or up on the trees with crossbows, and the 3 of them are in front of you, and one comes from the behind. This is literally a paragraph, if that I have written, but that's not 1d3 wolves or 1d6 rogues, whatever. It is in fact 1d6 rogues in theme, in style, with story, and with possibility of that extending to a different adventure as well, because you find the poster dead or alive, so you can actually go give them to the authorities or whatever this might be.
Yeah, absolutely. So those kinds of not so random encounters with just a small amount of thought that lead back to things in your world, this is a really, really good idea to just have in your sleeve. And again, 2 small fry adventure hooks. That might be a little wanted dead or alive poster in a tavern. That might be a rumor. If you're playing Skyrim, that might be like the bounty poster pushed over the bar by the barmaid. Having those little adventure hooks is a great way. If your players look like they don't know what to do next,
exactly.
If they look like they're floundering, give them something to move them anywhere, and you can move them towards a story that you have in your world.
But the trick is, once again, if you have it ready, and because you know the events that are happening in your world and how you're going to connect them, that this can give them tricks to actually bring them back to the fold, bring them back to any of the adventure, any of the major plots you have designed.
Absolutely, and this is the point. So remember that having these things at your fingertips, having them themed, is really, really going to help you make sure that you can keep playing whatever. If your players are floundering, that's fine, and also it's going to help you slice time. There is nothing worse than the players saying, we're going to that town. You're like, all right, You start on the road, and they're like, all right, we don't want to do anything. We want to get there. And you go, oh crap, I have not built that town yet. Oh crap, that's fine. That's okay. You've got plenty of stuff to happen along the way. Go back with me. You have 3 fully fledged encounters to throw at them if you need them. You have 2 small fry adventure hooks. For example, it gets dark, they have to stay overnight, or it starts to rain and they have to go somewhere, and then there's an adventure hook, or there's an encounter. You can always give them things to keep them occupied until they get to the town next session. That doesn't mean they can't get there. They can arrive at the gates and you can give a wonderful description. End of session. But you don't have to get them into the town that you haven't built yet. Ditto, if they really want to go somewhere, you can get them there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was about to say. In fact, don't forget, and that's a mistake that many people do, you control time and you control what's happening. If it was a TV series or a movie, you don't have to tell them how they go from the UK to France if there is no action there and there is nothing important to happen there. Also, don't fall into the trap of, oh crap, they're traveling, so I have to roll a random dice table to find out what kind of encounter is happening. You don't have to do that because it makes your players feel that this is a very technical game. It's a very formulaic game.
Yeah.
If you are to give them bad weather or a random encounter or anything like that, decide it before they even tell you that you're traveling somewhere. Because if you roll the dice at this point, then it feels like, oh, he's using time essentially. He's just essentially throwing us something, kind of thing.
Exactly. So you've got to make it feel like it's part of the story somehow. And the other thing I would say is don't forget about social encounters. Don't forget to give your players space to have them. And give your players space to roleplay. That is an important part of this as well. It's so easy to be so busy trying to occupy your players and throwing encounters at them and like grabbing names and describing towns that you forget that sometimes you just need to sit them around the fire and let them have a chat. You know? Sometimes you just need to say, it's evening, you're about to go to bed, what do you do? And give them space. So that is what we mean by you control time. Read your players. And again, we're not giving you GMing advice. We're just trying to say, make sure that you leave enough space as you throw encounters and do this and that and the other and move them on to the next scene, that they also have time to breathe and to interact and to play.
Absolutely.
Because those moments can be very memorable as well. And once you're done, again, you've played. It's learning time. There's lots of ways you can learn about your session. Session reports are a great way for you to keep your own notes.
I was about to say this is more important for you than anybody else.
Absolutely. And writing down what you've done. Holy crap, we just started a hype train. Thank you, guys. You can write about what happened, who happened. If you've crossed off those names and written descriptions, now is the time to make sure those are in your notes, because that piece of paper will get thrown away and you will lose them. You don't want that. Write them down somewhere. But of course, there's a lot to be learned from your players as well. Watch your players during the game and learn what's engaging them, because that's stuff that you need to be bringing back and reworking in, because that's stuff that they really like. Ask your players for feedback. This can be... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it can be... How did you find it?
Yeah.
What did you like about the session? What you didn't like about the session? All of those can help you better ascertain what is the focus that the players have, what are the things that grab their attention, which effectively means what are the things you should be expanding on before the next session.
Absolutely. Now, these can be as specific as, hey, how did you find it? Or as generic as, oh my god, when that thing happened... ... and then just see what they do. See how they react and see what they say. So you know your players best, you know how to work with them to get the best information out of them. You can also, if your characters are inclined, if your players are inclined, I should say, encourage them to write character journals or do retrospectives. I've had GMs who literally give me a questionnaire every now and then to say, how do you like it? How do you find the balance of social and encounter and discovery and exploration and investigation? And what are you hoping happens next?
I think that is very in the professional sphere, but in the non-professional sphere, in my own experience, it's better just to talk, because there are things that the players will say, and the truth is hidden between the lines,
In the
not
subtext,
on exactly
yeah.
on the subtext. Like you'll see, yes, I like that. For example, was a very good adventure. Actually, what you realize is actually what they like is the barmaiden. So you can give her a bit more role. You can
Give her an extra paragraph.
Exactly, give her an extra paragraph.
Give her a supporting role or a main role in an adventure. Make her a quest giver, for
A
example.
damsel in distress.
Damsel in distress.
A dragon rider who is a damsel in distress.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So again, that's part of the learning phase. Once you've played, use these tools to learn. You don't have to use them all every time. I would recommend writing session reports every time so you don't lose your crap. Yeah, making sure that you use these tools is a great way to make sure you're getting the information so that you can learn, so that you can dream about what comes next, and you can build what you need to build. Make sure your campaign is going in the right direction. That's what I was just talking about.
Yes.
I should have moved to that slide.
It's
sorry.
okay, no
Had
worries.
a frost giant on it and everything.
Yes. Nice frost giant.
Nice frost giant.
Kaiora did a great job on that.
Yeah, you did. And where do we go from here? So that is the Agile world building process. There is a setup stage, which comes in 3 parts. There is a prepping your players stage, where you get them engaged and involved in the process, so they really want to get in. And then there is the play cycle, which goes as long as you want it to go. That can be a 12-session campaign. It can be a 365-session campaign. It is entirely what you want it to be. That system will help you keep your world up to date with your players and keep you building what you need when you need it without getting world builder disease, without building before you play and never being able to start. And it will make your world feel as exciting and as rich and as planned as if you had built everything in advance. That's the dream for me as a GM, pretty much. And that's what this process can give you. And that's it. We are Janet and Dimitris. We made World Anvil, which is the ultimate world building tool. It is full of tools to help you build a world. Timelines, interactive maps. You can write articles, they all connect together. We have almost 1 million users. We are used by professional authors, professional GMs, gaming studios and the like. But we also have a ton of people who just want to play great games and need a way to give information to their players and store their information for themselves. So that is who we are. And we hope you enjoyed. We did have on the screen, but now Dimitris is showing you all the shinies.
Yeah.
We did have on the screen a little code for you to thank you guys for coming. If you are interested and you would like to, go check out World Anvil. It is our baby and our passion and our big old pile of love. But we also think it's very useful. We use it both personally ourselves, myself for writing novels and GMing games and managing characters, and Dimitris for GMing games and managing characters.
Indeed.
And yeah, if you want to, you can use the code GenCon at checkout for the next 48 hours for 25% off.
Yeah.
And it only remains to say, any questions?
And also the panel is now on the chat. If somebody can put it also on YouTube, please, that would be very good.
On the YouTubes.
Thank you very much.
You are more than welcome.
Yeah. So, guys, the panel is there. If you have any questions, let's check the list that the guys gave us to see if we can answer any of them.
It's not person.
Okay, don't worry. I'll do it. Leave that to me.
I've got my idiot boots on. Sorry.
Find questions. I will take care of
questions. So folks, the floor is open for questions. I can see we have a bunch already, which is fantastic. If you would like to ask a question, we will try to get to it. Capital letters question, and then your question is how you ask those. But let's see what we have already. A book about agile world building would be great. This is something that we will be working on, my dear beans. It's something that we've already started speccing out actually in our novel writing software that we made. Yeah, it's been requested a lot. We did a version of this talk before and people keep asking us for a book, so heck it guys, it's happening. We're writing you a book. Scotty Mike asks, you said, Janet, that you're an author as well as a GM, and prose is for authors. How do you as an author resist the urge to write prose as a DM? Well, I do this in 2 ways. I resist the urge during the building phase by writing copious notes, and then I turn those notes into world building articles on World Anvil. I'm sorry, but that is the answer. And that is how I get that that urge to write prose out. I use the world building articles for that, because when I'm like, yeah, I don't want to describe it in really dramatic detail, and then I'll include an aloud at the top that my players will hear. And if they want more information, or if they want to share the article later, I can do that. But essentially, that's where all the unpacking of the ideas and the intricate details and this and that, and the flavour and the smells and everything goes. But the basic information for the foundation document, for the setting the scene and for the plots, that stays as single sentences. Because if it becomes denser, it's impossible to reference quickly. And the point of those documents is that you can glance at them and remember what the hell you were thinking 6 months ago. Like that is why we keep those so lean. William Silver says, do you use focusing questions? As in, I want so that while
So focusing questions are a good way of doing especially motivation because it will give you context. So yes, it's a very good idea. And you'll find that throughout your goal building experience, in fact, focusing questions are a good way for you to start writing a paragraph or to start writing an adventure. We haven't talked about the adventure so much, but starting an adventure with a focusing question or using SMART as well as a methodology is an extremely good way.
Yeah, absolutely. Citizen of Melee, Your Highness, says, would you ever recommend having the meta change depending on the area of the world? Kingdom versus kingdom.
So there is world spanning meta and there is location spanning meta. We're not going into detail on that because that's actually for something you'll be doing later in a campaign, not in the beginning of the campaign. But
Absolutely.
Yes, you can have meta and you can have in fact locations in your world, specifically when we discussed before about the focusing points, that in one nation, for example, the focusing point might be more about military technology, while another is more about agriculture kind of thing, because the stories shift and change depending on the locale and the current struggles of the people in the location.
Absolutely. Pangerban the White says, so it seems like you'd fill out 3 and maybe link the others to them depending on how the primary 3 and the plot might affect their influence. This, I think, is the meta areas of expansion.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea there is to limit how many different bits of the world you are writing about in detail, so that you get at least some detail about some things, but you don't get all the detail about everything. That's the idea. So you get a sondage, like a deep dive into a few areas to give that level of detail that makes the world feel real.
Especially for the focusing points, consider the fact that there is a very clear shift that is happening in a big campaign, especially in about the 5th to 8th session. About that point, the players completely understand the characters or have a very good idea of how their characters work, and they know more about the world. At this point, you might see a shift on your players, like saying, okay, yeah, we started like that, but actually you see them that they're really pushing for X or Y. And at that point is that you're going back to your meta and you're like, this might need more expansion, and I might need to change a little bit my focus from, for example, military to espionage, for example, because they seem to like more this kind of missions, they seem to like more this kind of play. Yeah,
absolutely. And that will be the moment to expand in paragraphs, sentences and paragraphs, a new area of your world. Again, we
by area I mean essentially
discipline,
meta
category. Say Cyrus says, does it make sense for characters to know the major current affairs in the world if they are not, for example, upper class? Not necessarily, and even if they are upper class, they might not necessarily know.
Also, it depends on the kind of world, because in the modern world, for example, when you pick up Twitter and you can know pretty much the theoretically important things in the world, it's a different thing than a medieval world. You're absolutely right. In a medieval world, the chances are they won't know everything. Yeah. They shouldn't know everything. But if you're smart with your agile world building, you wouldn't have been writing about things that wouldn't have any impact to your actual campaign. So, in theory, the most educated person in the area that you are exploring with your meta information should know at least a very good percentage of them, even if it's falsified, because that's the other thing we discussed, that the truth of the world is not the truth of the people of the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is very important. Always ask yourselves what I know, what they should know, what other people will know.
I also want to say the writeriest thing in the world now. You ready? You ready? Are you ready? Show, don't tell. Yes. Yes. Show how these things can be seen in the world, even in your primer, and your players will start to deduce. Now that will make them feel very smart, Players who feel smart feel very happy. That is what you want. You want happy players.
I'll give you an example very quickly. Think about that. You have the players in the second session going to an ancient ruin and finding a beautiful ruin that you describe, for example, that in the top of each of the locations, for example, there is a flowery kind of marble-made structure. And then they go to another city, and suddenly in one of the buildings of the statue, they see the same pattern. You might roll a perception roll, for example, if you want to. You can just give them to them. What does this mean for the players? First of all, it means that they know what this might be.
They made a connection.
And they made a connection, and they will make them make smart, because also will make them wonder why that thing, which is obviously for that empire, is in the middle of that modern city kind of thing. What's going on here?
So there's a lot of ways that you can show and give clues. And again, that will make your players feel smart. Anything that makes your players feel smart is a good thing. And as they start to debate why X or Y might be happening, you get so much insight into how they are understanding your world.
And how they're thinking.
Exactly.
Also, that is why session reports are very important, because if you haven't written it in a previous session that they have seen that, even if you have pulled it out of your ass on the spot, you wouldn't remember it. Unless you had a session report that you have written after the session, and then you can actually go back to it and in fact and use it as, mystical, magical tools of awesomeness.
Yeah, absolutely. Winter Bunny, long question. My players often spread out in their logical thinking. It's hard to set them on a story that I've made without them vastly deviating from anything that remotely looks like what I've prepared.
Yep.
Oh yeah. You have normal players. Congratulations. They usually split themselves up. No! What's the best way to keep their individual character motivations in mind when I'm trying to build a narrative?
May I?
Yeah.
So, the trick here is session zeros, because in your session zeros and in your session zero with all your players, you will make sure that you tell them what they need to know. So you take the story that your players gave them, and then you create a beautiful web that makes the connections they have so strong that they cannot be broken, or the requirements of those connections so strong. So, for example, a good example I had in my campaign, I had two characters that are completely different from each other. Like, they really needed exactly the different things. Yeah. But when we're playing this science fiction campaign, I made it so the life of the one depended on the other.
Yeah.
Like, actually depending on it. So that created an unbreakable bond that literally made never split the party, because they were like, if you die, I die, and I cannot in fact have any say on if I'm gonna live or not if you're not alive. So they were like best friends forever, although they hated each other.
Yeah, so there are ways to bring your players together. I'm trying to find a way to tie them together without them feeling like they only have the illusion of choice. So yeah, that absolutely covers what you've said. And again, remember that at the end of the day, you might need to remind your players that they are part of a party, and that is a conceit of the game. A very common way that we've seen lately be happening in Theros or in Eberron is to give them a common overlord. Give them a patron, yeah, exactly. A patron, like either that's a god or it's an organization, because that will make sure that they can be slapped around if they start doing things like that. They're like, you have a mission, go do it kind of thing, or else. The other thing that you can use is organizational structures. Yes. So make the one the apprentice of the master, and the master will be in trouble if the apprentice dies. For example, make them family. For example, give them connections that are imposed, so that even if they are promoting me slapping them around. I love you guys. Says Winter Bunny. You're welcome. So giving them external pressures that make them rely on each other is also an important thing. Also, it shouldn't be you slapping them around. It should be, in fact, the evil NPCs that they hate, because there is nothing bringing players together than hatred for somebody else. Absolutely. That's why we bring villains in. Keys DM says, are the slides going to be available? They are already available. They have been shared in the chat. We can share them once again. Casey Jones Fiction says, you guys are sent from the gods. We do our best. For helping us as much as you do. I can't wait to upgrade my World Anvil membership. You are so welcome, Casey Jones. We do our best to be as helpful as we can. That was part of our mission when we set out with World Anvil. How do we help people? Cerulia Nota says, I already have a campaign going, which has been running for 3 months. Whoop, whoop. I did a tiny bit of top-down world building, gave some names for major countries and their aspects, and have mostly been doing bottom-up. I wanted to get the game started and not get stuck in the world building. Yes, great idea. Good job. Is there a good strategy sorry, I lost power of my tongue. Is there a good strategy to do this world building mid-stream? Any examples of doing this? Absolutely.
Yes.
From what you have, go to the beginning, do your foundation, do your meta, do your setting the scene. You'll have a lot of that information already. So make sure that you're not expanding it. Make sure you're boiling it down.
Yeah. That was a great way of actually putting it, exactly.
That's
boil
the crucial
down what
thing.
you have. And then you will find some gaps and things that you don't have. These you can fill, but this should be new information you haven't thought of and answers that you haven't had, questions you didn't have an answer for, essentially, at this point.
Absolutely. And essentially, by going through that process, you'll have a lot of information. You might even feel overwhelmed by the information you already have. This is a good way of keeping it very clean, very lean, things that you can reference, and then again, you can start expanding on what you have in sentences and paragraphs.
Absolutely, and just to be clear, that's how this method started. It started midway on a campaign, and I was like, this is really hard.
Yeah.
I'm doing something wrong. My player's going everywhere. What am I doing wrong? And that's where we started talking about with Janet the very first time we talked, and then Janet did exactly the same mistake, and we've done it again with Janet, and then we have, in fact, this solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we say, we both use this method for games and novels because it's the only method we found that is tenable and manageable. Bird Builder says, do you think it could be useful to work up a large map of the major region of the world, whether it be a region map or a full world map?
So I'm gonna give you a trick there, which is given to us by Devon.
Exactly.
Devon Rue is one of a good friend and an amazing cartographer. What she said is always never give your players more map than you are willing to part with in comes to your sanity. Which, in other words, your map should be as small as it needs to be for you to play your game. You can always imply a bigger map, but you don't have to know them. Especially if you're playing fantasy, high fantasy, the chances are they've never seen a freaking map anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So Devon's point was really interesting. She was like, if you give them a beautiful map, they will want to explore every single part of that. Make sure the map is no bigger than the campaign area that you want to be in. And if you want to give them a basic impression of the world, do it in something sketchy and ugly. Because they won't be tempted to explore that if you're like, well, over here there's this, and over here there's this, and you've heard rumours that there's something there, but actually there's so many giant sea monsters that, yeah, you'll die before you get there. That's enough. That's
and maybe
all you really
we'll
need
push
to know.
them to go to the dragon monsters because,
Players.
But
at least they'll go prepared, right?
Theoretically speaking.
We have an expanded version of this talk that will go into the book, which talks about how to set boundaries that don't feel like boundaries. So yeah, again, once the book is out, you'll learn more about that. But in a 90-minute talk with questions, there's only so much we can manage.
Indeed.
Kathy Larkin says, if you are writing a novel, do you need more than this, or is this enough world building? Well, the novel version of this process is a little bit different. It works with drafts. It depends what kind of novelist you are as well. So eventually, you will end up building your world in the same way, in sentences and paragraphs, gradually as you expand your plot, your book, your drafts, your book world, your series, and everything else. But it goes in the same way, so you don't end up accidentally writing the Silmarillion. This is basically what this. We could call this book Agile. We could call this book Agile Worldbuilding: How Not to Write the Silmarillion. Basically.
Yes. We are on time, and I'm conscious that other people would like to go to see other streams at this point.
Absolutely.
I would like to remind people that this talk will be given again tomorrow if you want to attend, and of course you can answer other questions. Do we have any other questions you would like to answer here? I know we have many of them.
Let's have a quick look. All right, so folks, I will first of all remind you, we're back tomorrow with this talk. If your question was not answered today, pop in tomorrow and we will keep these questions and try and answer them then.
Also, we will be going live on Tuesday again.
Yeah.
Tuesday?
No, not Tuesday, Friday.
Friday this time around. Friday at
7 p.m. UK time. That is 2 p.m. Eastern Time and 11 a.m. Pacific time. Maths is hard.
And we can reply to all of those questions that we haven't replied in order to give you some more context on the
Absolutely. We do weekly seminars, guys. So if you have questions about this, you can always hop into one of those and ask us questions about how to approach things. The seminars are not just for using World Anvil, they're for writing, they're for GMing. We also do dedicated writing streams. There's been a few questions about World Anvil for writers, world building for writers, our novel writing software, which we just released. It's so new, we haven't even done the public release yet. We have it on the website, it works, it's all putting together. I'm currently using it to write a novel, but we haven't done the public release yet. So Well, we can answer all of those questions soon. I do urge you guys, if you are interested, go check out World Anvil. We built it because I needed to keep track of the world building for my novels, and Dimitri needed to keep track of the world building for his games. It is custom made for this purpose by people who create these things. And yes, as Tilla said, come to our Discord for more questions. We have the friendliest and nicest community on the entire internet. We are very lucky, or at least that we've found.
And with that, thank you so very much for joining us. You are amazing.
We have some end of stream thanks to give.
Okay.
We have some end of stream thanks. I will not sing them, as is customary on our streams, because we have a lot of guests and I don't want to scare you. But I would like to thank Physicist, Vorandril, Ilion Blaze for that big old gift of subs. Zax Wild, Rima, Ajram, Bruno, Tiburon, Panga Ban the White, Kumar Wolf, and Riastrad Gaming, and Winter Bunny, and Air Johns. Guys, thank you so much. Thank you for the bits. If you are up for it, we go live in 2.5 hours with our end of summer camp stream. That's going to be a big old exciting stream. We're doing some big raffles in that as well. And we are doing another Gen Con stream today. Yes, at 9 o'clock UK time. That is 1 p.m. Pacific time and 4 p.m. Eastern time. This is my math face. I'll be going live with Nathan Rice from Zombie Orpheus Entertainment. Yes, the guys who made Journey Quest. Yes, the guys who made Gamers the Darkness Rising. I'm doing a celebrity game for weird games playing Through the Breach, which is set in an incredible world. It is my favourite RPG system right now. Lots and lots of celebrities. It is going to be an amazing game. So if you're up for a cool RPG game, you want to get in, and again, there's a raffle in that one as well, come join us on this channel at 9 p.m. UK time. For now, we are going on a raid. So if you would like to see World Anvil in action, our very own RPG dinosaur Bob, who has a fantastic beard, is going live with some world building. So stick where you are. If you are on Twitch, if you are on YouTube, hop into this URL.
And if you're going to another Gen Con talk, I hope you have fun and you're enjoying Gen Con. It's a beautiful organization. I was very happy we can manage to do it at least online this time around. We love you very much, guys. And as we say in our country, grab your hammer and go world build. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye, sweetie.